Hi, friends. Anne McKenna. I have a subject that I have had in my heart for a while. And yes, was it yesterday? Yes, yesterday my pastor preached on a passage of the Bible that triggered that subject again. And I thought, it's time. I want to talk differently from what he preached, but using the text that he used. And I want to talk about the legacy of faith. Now, this is a subject that I have written about in my first book that I'm in the process of revising. So that's coming and it's exciting. Um, but the legacy of faith is a beautiful legacy. So in the Bible, there is a lot of talk on leaving a legacy. Even God Himself calls us the heirs of His kingdom, He calls us His heirs. Now, I might not pronounce the words the right way, but I hope you understand what I'm saying because I was raised speaking various languages, and so bear with my pronunciation. But leaving a legacy is extremely important. Leaving inheritance for your children and your children's children is extremely important. And the most important legacy that you can leave with your children is the legacy of faith, because that is what cannot be taken away from them. So we had Solomon, who was extremely rich, extremely materially successful. He was wise. He had asked God for wisdom on how to lead the people that God chose him to lead. And at the end of his life, though, he looks back and says, it's all vanity. All the things that he had acquired were vanity. And what the Lord was speaking to my heart is, why is it that a man like Solomon, who had so much um, attached to him, why would he, at the end of his life, look at everything and say it's all vanity? It does not satisfy. And that's where I come with the subject of leaving the legacy of faith, leaving the inheritance of faith. So here is, if you want to read from Ecclesiastes chapter 2, but I'm just going to read a few verses from 17 of what Solomon says before I engage more in this subject. And just listen to how he sounds. This is a man that had everything, materials. So let's hear what he says here. Therefore, I hated life because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me, for all is vanity and grasping for the air. Then I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Yet he will rule over all my labor in which I toiled, and in which I have sown myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. That's verse 19. And I'm just going to pause there for a second. So this is a man who worked hard. He wasn't just left with things, because we know King David was also rich. He had stuff that he handed down to his son. But King David handed things, but he also taught lessons. And Solomon, one of the things that he learned from his father is handwork. Handwork. You don't just not work because you are rich, because you have things. It doesn't go that way. You learn to work and you learn to love working because God himself is a working God. He's always at work. In the beginning, he started with working. And to today, he is still working in our lives. He's always working and he created us to work. So work is part of who God made us to be. And we see that Solomon is confessing here that he worked really hard. And then at the end of his life, he's wondering, who is going to inherit this? Is the person inheriting this capable of taking good care of what I worked so hard for? Or is this person a fool? And those are things that we don't have control over. So we work so hard and hopefully we love our jobs, but we work so hard. Studies show that a very small percentage of people actually love the jobs that they do. Vast majority of people hate their job. So I hope that you are one of those people who love the work that you do, that you're excited to go there and you're excited for the next morning. Um, but after the hard labor, Solomon was coming to the end of his life. And he's looking back like we all will. If God blesses us to remain and to grow older in our years, we will look back. We will look back. The end stages of life are about looking back to how you've lived your life, to what you are leaving behind. That's what the end of life is about, which is why the elderly are great at telling stories, looking back, telling you what they have accomplished, telling you what they are proud of, telling you what their regrets are, because that's just how life is. At the end of life, you're going to have to look back. So he's looking back and he's thinking, wow, it's all vanity. And look at everything I worked so hard for. Who will I leave it for? And one thing is, regardless of how hard you work in life and regardless of how much you acquire, when time for death comes, you leave with nothing. Somebody said, and this stuck with me, when babies are born, they are born with their fists closed. So if you look at a baby, their fists are closed, which is a symbol of they are coming to get. That's what we come to this one to do, is to get. And we come in with their fist closed. But when death comes, people die with their hands stretched out. You can't live with anything. And I've watched many people take their last breath. I'm a hospice chaplain. So part of my job is vigil visits and vigil presence for those who are dying. And I have had the honor and the privilege to see many, many people take their last breath, which is why, by the way, I'm starting more to talk about end of life because I'm also working on a project that is based on end of life and afterlife that I am really excited about. Um, for helping people, the questions that I have been asked through my 17 years of being a chaplain, the questions that I have been asked, the things that I have learned that I can share to help people deal with end of life issues. I'm excited to share that. So I'm working on that. But what I was saying is at death, people die with hands wide stretched open. People don't die with their fists closed like when they were born. So when we die, we don't bring anything. So regardless of a person who is a multimillionaire or who has so much wealth and so much of everything, You cannot live with anything when you leave this earth. And you know what else? You have no control over what the next person will do with what you leave for them. They are going to do whatever they want with it. And you might work so hard and never take a vacation. You know, recently, my father, their church organized a tour to Mombasa. I think it was last year. And for the first time, my dad took off work intentionally to go for a tour, for a vacation somewhere. Now he has been to United States to visit me, but he came to United States to help me because I needed his help. So that wasn't so much of a vacation. He came to help me. The first time my father took time for like a week to go somewhere and have vacation, just enjoy being with other men from the church, he was 80 years old. My dad is 82. Praise God. He was 80 years old when he took vacation for his first time. He's a hard worker. He has worked so hard through his life. But guess what? When time comes, he is not going to live with anything. And he has no control over what any of what he leaves behind with his children. He has no control over how any will use it. So the prodigal son, the father gave him an inheritance, because that's what parents do. They give their children inheritance. They gave him inheritance. This prodigal son left home. He went away and wasted everything on horrible lifestyle. And he wasted everything to where he had nothing left. Cut long story short, you're gonna have to read that, or we'll talk about it someday as I continue doing this. He had nothing left, and he just was homeless. And he considered going back to his father, and he said, I'm going to back to my father, and I'm even willing to be one of his servants. Can you imagine how the father felt when he saw his son coming back and saying, I'm happy to be your servant? Now he demoted himself. From being a son, he came back asking to be a servant. So when I see Solomon lamenting here, looking back and saying, yeah, I worked so hard and I don't know what the next person will do with the toil of my life. Life is all a vanity. It makes me think of a legacy that will never be taken away from your children and from those you leave behind. So one of the things that I love to talk about is the legacy of faith, because the legacy of faith cannot be taken away from your children. And I thank God for my parents, because when they were raising us, they raised us in the faith that they knew the best they knew. They believed. We prayed together every morning. We prayed together every night. In my life growing up in our home, we prayed together every day. And whenever we prayed and God blessed my mom, my dad, gave us, life and whatever, my mom would always say, look at what God did for us. She was always diligent to turn it around and say, this is what God has done. We prayed and God answered. So she raised us in faith. And what I can tell you is the things that I have encountered in life, which I have encountered serious things. I have been to a verge of, I have sat on a deathbed where I was actually in the dying process, and that's another day story. But the doctors literally told me that they were worried I was going to die and I was not going to make it. They literally told me that. So I was sitting on that bed begging God for a second chance. And I thank God that He gave me a second chance. 11 years later, I'm still sitting here. Praise be to God. I thank God for second chances. So God gave me a second chance. But what got me through that season of my life that was extremely difficult, I lost everything. I lost myself. I forgot who I was. It was a very difficult season of my life. And I always say, looking at children can save your life, because at that moment I was feeling like I could not make it. But looking at my children made me say, you know what? I have to make it. I have no choice but to make it. So God saw me through that season. But had I not known God, had I not known that I can trust God when I could not trust anybody else, had I not known that God is faithful, I don't know that I would be sitting here today. So the legacy of faith is very important to pass down to your children. And especially today, the world is corrupt. The lies are so big. You watch people lying, and it's so shocking to see how there's no fear of God. People lie with a straight face, like they don't care. And they get really mad that you don't believe what they are lying to you about. Raising children with a legacy of faith, because when we have no control over what is going on around us, we can still depend on God, because He is in control of everything that is happening. He is in control, and He doesn't lose control. We may not understand, but He doesn't sleep. He's always awake. He's watching every move. He is in control. So, trusting God, staying in prayer, seeking Him when I was alone with no one to turn to. I'm just telling you. And if you don't know what that is like, some people have said, you had totally no one. Yes, I had totally no one, because when you've been so hurt that you don't even know who to trust, that's where I was. So I was there with God, and He saw me through. I thank God for parents who passed down the legacy of faith. So here Solomon looks around, and it's really good to pass things to your children if you can. One other thing that I always encourage people, legacy of educating. Educate your children. Educate your children the best you can. When your child has certificate, when your child has a degree, no one can look down on them. No one can put them down. So educate your children. That's the other legacy that you can give to them, because sometimes things can go wrong. You have seen businesses shut down. You have seen a whole farm get on fire one day and it's gone. Things happen. The things that we accumulate, things can happen that can cause people to lose everything. And indeed, those things happen on a regular basis. You read about them, you hear about them. So those things happen. The legacy of faith, education, those kind of legacy, inheritance, they cannot be taken away from your children. So pass those down. But here is Solomon lamenting. He says, it's all vanity. I have no control over what whoever is left with all my sweat will do with it. We don't. We do not have control over that. Therefore, I turned my heart and despaired of all the labor in which I had toiled under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, yet he must leave his inheritance to a man who has not labored for it. Whew! There you go. He must leave it for a man who has not labored for it. And oftentimes, the people that are left with an inheritance that they have not labored for, there are many people that waste it. There are many people that get into drunkenness, into arrogance, into power struggles, and they don't care because they have never had to set their alarm clock, to wake up early, to skip lunch, and feel the pain of working hard. And so they just don't get it and they waste it. And we can see him saying here, this is also vanity and a great evil. For what has a man for all his labor and for the strife of his heart with which he has toiled under the sun? For all his days are sorrowful and his work burdensome. Even in the night, his heart takes no rest. This is vanity. So I encourage you, as you live your life, as you work hard, take vacations. It took my dad 80 years to take a week to just go and enjoy with other men from the church and see places and see things. We don't have to wait to be 80 years to do that. Take vacations, take time off, enjoy your family, eat the best that you can be able to eat. Don't wait to look back and say it's all vanity. The greatest thing that you can leave with your children is the legacy of faith, learning the Word of God, teaching them the Word of God, teaching them to trust God. That will help them through life. It will get them through difficult situations. And if they learn to trust God, you don't even have to worry about things. Because you know what? I came to this country with a bag of clothes. I came to United of States from Kenya in Africa with a bag of clothes. It's all I had when I came here. But my parents taught me faith. They taught me hard work. They taught me positive values and to view life positively. And when I came here, even when I went through difficult times, I knew how to work hard. I knew how to go and work 16 hours so that I can pay for my tuition and pay for my rent. I knew how to do that because I was taught to work hard. I was taught not to complain about working. It's normal. You work or you don't eat. My father would always say, you work or you don't eat. So I came here with a bag of clothes and I made it. And eventually, my parents have also blessed me with some things. But I came here with a bag of clothes. So the legacy of faith is what will get your kids through the difficulties of life. Education. My father always valued education. He would always encourage us, go to school, get a degree, get another degree, get a PhD. Now, I don't have a PhD. My dad still sings to me about it. Go get a PhD. I'm like, Dad, what am I getting a PhD for? I don't need a PhD. I don't know. I can't say never. Maybe someday I might, but I've never considered doing a PhD because in my book, it's not necessary to me. Now, some people, they want to get a PhD and it might be a good thing. Go for it. I always cheer anybody who succeeds in doing what God has placed in their heart to do. But I'm not one to do things just because everybody else is doing it. I live my life and I celebrate those who succeed because I don't compete. I live my life and I celebrate those who live their lives. So But education is so important. Nobody can take it from you. And because of education, God has opened doors that I have jobs that I love to do. I am a professor, I teach, and I am a chaplain. And I love both of what I do. Among other things, I'm a founder of an organization. I raise money. And the children in Kenya are also being raised in faith. They are being taught who they are in Christ. Because I believe how they began their lives, orphaned, abandoned, is not what's going to mark how they will end their lives. So the legacy of faith is, I believe in it. I want to spread it wherever God gives me the opportunity. And I encourage you to pass it down to your children and to your children's children, because life is getting more and more difficult. If your children know how to go to God when there's nobody else to talk to, they know that God is listening. It will get them through very difficult situations. And in the case where you raise them in faith, they learn to hear from God, they can look back in their lives and say, you know what? I thank God for my life. In my life as a chaplain, I have seen people who die and they regret. They look back and they regret. They wish they had done this or done that or done the other. But there's also people that die, they are ready. They did everything they wanted. They are like, I had a good life, and they are ready to go. So when you raise your children to depend on God to guide their steps, so that as we live this life, and according to Erickson, his theory of development, end of life is a season of looking back. So let us live our lives so that as we look back, we are not looking back with regrets of not having lived our life, not having enjoyed our lives, not having put God at the center of everything you do. Here is Solomon. He had wives and concubines and maids and servants and animal. He had everything. He was full of lust too. I mean, that's a lot of women. He had all these things. And at the end of life, he's looking back saying, it's all vanity. How do you even describe that? A man who had so much, he thought pressure, having fun, being happy. I don't believe in happiness. I believe in having joy. There's so much preaching about being happy, do whatever makes you happy. It's all vanity. Happiness, going after happiness is all vanity. The only thing that will last is joy. The joy of the Lord is our strength. And let me tell you something about joy. Joy does not depend on circumstances. You can be going through a very difficult time and have peace and have joy in your heart, because joy is brought by hope. It's brought by hope. When you are going through a tough time and saying, you know what, there is hope. I'm going to get through this and I'll be okay. There is hope. It rises joy even through the difficult times. Now, I'm saying this as a person who has been through some really, really bad times. So I'm not preaching something that I've not lived through. You can find joy in extremely troubled time. That's the advantage of having the legacy of faith and passing it down. So my encouragement today is leave a legacy of faith with your children. It's good to work hard and leave them with things and help them pay some of their, whether it's school fees, or help them, do certain things in their lives. But the thing that will not be taken away from them, the thing that will keep them going, is them learning how to look up and look up to God for themselves. Is them learning how to go to the Word of God and open it up and read it, take time to meditate on it, and hear God guiding them. Because when God guides you, you skip steps of your life. When God guides you, opportunities come without you even looking for them. When God guides you, amazing things can happen in your life, and not can, they happen in your life. So don't compromise. There's so much going on in our lives today where the Bible is being smeared, it's being put aside. We are thinking with our minds what is good, and God says, our goodness, He says, your goodness is like filthy rags to me. God is not calling us to be good without Him. He's calling us to be righteous. When you are righteous, then goodness will follow. But righteousness is not always termed as good, because righteousness comes with correction, rebuking, and if you know, we human beings, we don't like to be told we are wrong. A righteous person is gonna say this is wrong, and many people get very offended when somebody says something is wrong. That's why there's so many people trying to be good and not righteous. God is calling us to righteousness. When you are righteous, you don't have to worry about being good, because it will happen. The goodness of God will flow through you. And some people might not see you as doing everything good because you're not calling everything good. God doesn't call everything good. He calls some things good, He calls some things bad, He calls some things sinful, He calls some things. So, and what God calls them, whether we change those terms and make them sound good and soft, what God calls them is what they are. So let's hold faith firm. Holding faith is not easy. And Jesus told us it's not easy. Some people think when we get saved, life becomes easy. No, actually, it gets hard. That's why you have to dig your heels in really, really tight, because all of a sudden, even persecution will come against you. But with God, you are victorious. So anyway, I still would encourage you to get deep in your faith with God and to pass that on to your children and to your children's children. I'm going to be talking about how to leave a legacy of faith, because that is in my heart and I'm excited about it. Today, I just wanted to lay that ground. Leave a legacy of faith. Pass it down generations to come. May God bless you.